Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining our Quality of Life and Public Safety Committee this evening. Today is Tuesday, November 17th, 2020. We are being recorded by HPA-TV.org, Channel 96 on Comcast and Frontier. I also want to thank our audience for joining our meeting this evening and hearing what everyone has to say and share with the public. I also want to give a special thanks to our state attorney, Charmise Walcott, for joining us and sharing a small presentation with us. And that will be our first agenda. So we also have two other items on the agenda, which is the presentation for the chief from Chief Freeman and HFD, and also from Chief Thody from the HPD. Thank you. So we will start with our state attorney, Charmise Walcott. Thank you for joining us, Charmise.
Thank you, Councilman Sanchez, and members. Thank you so much for having me here today, tonight, actually. I do appreciate the opportunity to come before you and just present on a few of the items that the State's Attorney's Office has been working on. It's been about 8 weeks since I took office. I was appointed on September 25th. And over those 8 weeks, we've done a lot of work getting up to speed and getting acquainted with Hartford, with the needs of the Hartford Police Department, with Hartford residents, and just engaging with the community. I'm very happy to report that we've had successful meetings with the Hartford Police Department, and I know Chief Thody is here today, will be giving a presentation, and Assistant Chief Medina is on the line. We've met on several occasions to address issues that are happening, which everyone's aware of course, the increase in the gun violence, and also to specifically to look at issues surrounding the amount of car thefts and car break-ins. But we also speak very frequently on other more day-to-day things. I've had occasion to reach out to Chief Thody on several occasions, inquiring about a case here or a case there. And it's been a very good relationship with good response, as well as from Assistant Chief Medina and other members of HPD that I've reached out to. So that's been very good. I'm happy to report that we've been able to, when I say we, I'm talking about the State's Attorney's Office. I look at us as a team. We've been able to engage with the community. Most recently, we did attend an NRZ meeting on the South Side. We went to the Marge Street NRZ, and that was a very good meeting, and it was well attended. And members of the community really spoke openly about some of the issues that they're facing, some of the things that they would like to see done, including the reopening of the Hartford Community Court, which has been closed due to the pandemic. And they also discussed issues surrounding the firearm offenses, and how the State's Attorney's Office is addressing that, as well as issues around juvenile matters. So we're going to have some continued discussions, but we are listening to the community and getting out and engaging. I was also lucky enough to meet with representatives from Mothers United Against Violence, which is a group, as you all, I'm sure you all know, that respond to homicides, and assist the victims' families in those cases. And we have some good programming coming up. They've asked for some assistance navigating certain areas of the court system, and we're going to get together so that I can give a presentation to them on that topic. So as far as engaging with the community, State's Attorney's Office is there and is listening. We're also working, I actually just finished a meeting today with the Office of Adult Probation, where we're working to put together some coalitions and just build better collaboration between the State's Attorney's Office, the Office of Adult Probation, Hartford Police, and dealing with cases that have been, or individuals who we think may be in need of additional services, especially in these difficult times, and maybe a little bit of additional support and monitoring. So we're going to be going forward on that. And lastly, just tell you that we are working on legislation to address some of the difficulties that we've seen in the court system with the changes that were made to the juvenile justice laws. Right now, we as you all know, we are dealing with the issue of the uptick in violence, uptick in car thefts and car break-ins, and a lot of it is attributable to individuals that are still within the juvenile court system, so the 16, 17-year-olds. And we are working on a few pieces of legislation that we're hoping that the local legislators will take up. That'll make it a little bit easier to bring cases out of the juvenile court and up to the GA court, so that we can engage different types of services in dealing with these crimes that are really affecting everyone, neighborhoods from the north end through the south end in Hartford and even greater Hartford. And they are crimes that, when you first look at them, like a car theft, you may say, well, it's a property crime, but they're property crimes that then lead to physical injury and more, and sometimes death. So there are cases that we have to deal with and address. So I think over the last 8 weeks, the state attorney's office has been pretty busy and working on a lot of issues. We still have a lot of issues to go. There's been a lot of things that have been flagged and been raised and have been concerns that we can work on. The agenda is constantly evolving, but one thing I am happy to report is that when I applied for this position, I indicated to the commission that that my office, the attorney's office, would take a stance of being transparent, being open, and collaborating, right? And I think that from what I've seen over the past 8 weeks, we have a 99.9% buy-in to that mission, to that motto, and we are going forward with it, and it's going good. So if you have any questions, I'd love to answer any questions that you have, or specific areas of concern.
Okay, at this moment, I'd like to also recognize our Council President, Molly Rosado, that just joined us. Molly, this is our new State Attorney, Sharmise Walcott. They just finished speaking. So I see that Councilman Mickham has a question.
Thank you, Councilman Sanchez. Ms. Walcott, you said that you are, not you, but plural you, are working on projects that would bring more children into the jurisdiction of the adult court. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So when I like to say the juveniles, right? Because we're really talking about the 15, 16, 17-year-olds. We do have a juvenile court system. You cannot transfer anyone under 15. I think it's actually under 14, was just a change. But what's happening is, as kids get a little bit older, as they start to engage in, give a certain sect, as they start to engage in crime, they are continuing to engage, and the services of the juvenile court are not meeting these youth where they're at. So we're these kids are in what I like to, what I kind of refer to as a gray area, where you don't want to prosecute them as adults. You don't want them to have these criminal records that will affect them forever. But at the same time, the services of a juvenile court, counseling, community service, making sure that they go to school, they're in need of something a little bit more rigorous, and a little bit more oversight. And so by bringing them into the adult court arena at the GA level, would allow us to put better support services in place and have better oversight that could actually address some of the issues and needs that these youth are facing.
So let me just follow up. So what class of juvenile offenders would you bring into the adult court? That's what I'm trying to get.
The repeat offenders. the repeat
For
offenders.
any offense?
Not for any offense. Specifically, where we're seeing the biggest need right now is the repeat offenders in the area of car thefts, right? So, proposal may be youth that steal or that are charged with stealing that third vehicle, right? So, first vehicle, you're still in juvenile court. Second vehicle, maybe you're still there on the third vehicle. Maybe a need for more intensive services. When we have youth with the gun possession charges, I think those should come to the adult court. Those are youth that are in need of more intensive services than what they could get at the juvenile court. So for a gun possession, I wouldn't wait until the third offense. The request would be that those transfer over.
I don't want to belabor the point. I know we have other business, but why not? I mean, data show that transferring kids to adult court actually increases long-term recidivism. Why not just propose to make the services available while keeping them under the supervision of juvenile probation?
Because I think these services are available through the Office of Adult Probation. For example, they have a Unity program. There's programs that are out there that provide the needs that provide the services that the youth need. They're not under the umbrella of the juvenile court, and so it's a situation where we could bring the youth to the services easier than we could bring the services to the youth. And while the data does show, that there could be negative, or that's how we got here, right? There's negative implications of bringing kids into adult courts, but I think that we were bringing kids into adult courts prior to all the changes. We were bringing them into the adult courts with the wrong focus. Bringing them into adult courts with the focus of stricter punishment may help for recidivism, and that's not the case. If you're going to bring them into adult court, it should be because of services and the oversight.
Council President Rosado.
Hi, I want to be mindful of other items that we have on this agenda, but I'm right there with Councilman Midstrom. You just finished saying that, these services are provided in adult court. Why can't you bring these services to the juvenile court?
In part, so for example, for the Unity program that they have in the Office of Adult Probation, that's a program and a grant that's specific to adult probation, and it's not applicable to the juvenile court. Could we increase the programs and the services that are available in juvenile court? I guess to some extent we could. But right now, what I'm seeing is that the restrictions that are placed in the juvenile court are such that it makes the delivery of certain services difficult. And to be honest with you, what we have right now is we have a problem in the community that we're seeing that needs to be addressed. And there are programs in place to address them at the adult level or within the adult court, and still accomplish some of the goals like putting the services in place. There are diversionary programs available, as you all are aware. Diversionary programs are available so that the kids don't walk away with adult records and things of that nature. But what I'm talking about are the youth that are, like I said, the 3 arrests for the car thefts. We're talking about, repeated behavior and a demonstrated need for something a little more intensive.
Okay, thank you.
So I'd like to chime in right here. So it sounds to me like in order to receive those services, you have to reach a level of severity before you can apply for those services for these individuals. It seems, same thing, not to say is you can compare it, but, when someone falls behind 6 months in their mortgage payment and they're looking for help from the bank, well, you got to reach a certain level of, debt. So sort of say, so it seems like once you reach that severity and you move on to the GA level, now you have all these, resources that can be used to help these individuals. So I do want to add something, because this is, one of the conversation I would like to have with you. And in Puerto Rico, we have what's called the Youth Challenge Academy program, and it's sponsored by the National Guard. And I was hoping that maybe you can look into, and I can send you information on it as well. But if you can look into this program, and what they do is they take, juveniles, and when they have three strikes, they have a choice, and you can either serve time, whether it's 6 months or what have you, or you can join this academy, which is more or less like a boot camp academy. But they follow strict rules. They also help you get your GED program, also get your high school program as well. But then they train you as well, and they educate you, and that is for 6 months, and in some cases 1 year. So I'm hoping that even prior to reaching to the GA level, if we can find a way where we can incorporate a program like this, prior to those three strikes out, if you may.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping, and I know that there's other states that do have some type of a boot camp kind of situation, but this isn't, like a military boot camp, but they will train you as similar to that.
I'll be happy to look into it. We're actually putting a lot of work and thought into how to address the issue with the juveniles and with the youth. Just today, I had a meeting with prosecutors out in San Diego, because they have a program to see how that's working for them, and to see if it's something that is applicable here. We do have an issue with the increase in the crime. We do need to address it, but at the same time, I'm very mindful of the need of the youth to get the resources, get the services that they need, so that those that are on the cusp, right, of either making good decisions that are going to go on to produce good results, that we get them the things that they need so that they can do that. Kids who may just be a little turned around right now, maybe we can engage them and get them back onto the right path. I think that there's a lot of things that we can do. I think it's going to require members of the community, right? Elders in the community. I'm talking church leaders. I'm talking about community leaders, even leaders at school. There's a lot of nonprofits in Hartford. We have an amazing wealth of nonprofit groups that are dedicated to the youth and to providing them services. And I think it's just getting all that organized around a program where we could say, okay, this is the plan. This is what we want to do. Can you partner with us and get this done? And we're also kind of dealing with a little bit of a time thing here. I don't want to go to a committee where this gets studied for 3 years, and in the meantime,
right,
we've lost a lot of time and a lot of ground. So I'm trying to pull this together sooner rather than later, and I'd love to take a look at the Youth Challenge Academy. There's some research that says boot camps are good. There's some research that says, right now it's all about restorative programs and restorative justice, and that's the way that we should be going. But I'm looking at it all.
Okay, and I'd like to add also that two more things, and I'll get to you, Councilman LeBron. So this Youth Challenge Academy, they also accept volunteers. If an individual realizes there's nowhere to go, they see that they see their future within the next year, and they want to change their own lives. So that's accepted as well. It also has a cash incentive at the end of the academy. I think it's actually 1 year, the academy, and then to also add, I'm a true believer that you don't take that individual out of his environment, his or her environment, and you create a program within the same environment that they've been having their issues. Is going to be a challenge for that individual, which I would like to see, that if there's a program created, that it can be located out of their what they understand and what they see on a daily basis, so that it'll help them focus on breaking the habit that they may have. Councilman LeBron.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. All right. So through you, Mr. Chair, Ms. Walcott, it sounds like the major issue in terms of the youth is about access, and it sounds like they have a better access opportunity in the GA side. I guess GA meaning adult side. I would presume. So with that being said, assuming and going back on Councilman Mixdom's, and I think everyone's in agreement that when juveniles are transferred to adult court, there's a higher rate of recidivism. So in addressing that line of demarcation between juveniles and adults, is the issue in terms of access. I understand that more access available opportunities on the adult side now. But going back also to Madam President or President Rosado's claim, is the issue contractually bringing the programs over to the youth side? Is it a budgetary thing in terms of CSSD's or the Community Sports and Services Division's budget? What makes that so difficult? Is it because of budget items and we're in a new budget year and more money needs to be demarcated to the youth side to provide services? I'm just curious, like what seems to be that lynch point where we can't bring the services, rather contractually or through the budgetary side?
I think it's a little bit of both. And so for a long time, and I apologize, when I say GA, I am talking about the adult court. So the adult court's divided into the GA and the Part A. GA is kind of like for your lower level crimes. Your Part A is for your very serious crimes. And so I'm talking about, that middle level. I don't want to bring them up to a Part A, but down in the middle level. And the barrier is, it's both of them. And so the juvenile courts, and whenever we talk about juvenile court, there's a lot of good safeguards that were put in place to protect their confidentiality, right, and keep the court closed. And there's certain people that have access. Some of the good things that they do is, we have juvenile review boards, and then there's juvenile probation officers. Things can go non-judicial if they're not that serious. If there's a probation officer, they go to probation. That probation office is limited. The programs that the probation office has under its umbrella are limited. For a long time, prosecutors weren't there. They were kind of like a part-time prosecutor. So now we have full-time prosecutors in Hartford. We have 3 juvenile prosecutors who handle just juvenile cases in Hartford. So we have a team over there, but there's a lot of restrictions around what they can do. There's a lot of restrictions around what you can do, who can know what you're doing, what services there are, how long there are. The time limits for juvenile cases and how long you can kind of have things going are very restricted. And so when you get into the adult court, you have a bit more flexibility to design programs that are able to adapt quickly to the needs of the youth of today, right? So the programs that we had from 5 years ago may not be adequately addressing the needs that the kids have today, and we have more flexibility. So, when that kid says in juvenile court, well, I'm stealing cars because I need to get to work, then maybe juvenile court can say, okay, well, here's a bus pass, right? In adult court, we can say, okay, here's a resource counselor, here's a bus pass, here's a job training skills class, there's other things and other avenues. And it would be good if all that was available in juvenile court, but sometimes the restrictions that are placed around juvenile court to protect the youth limit that.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilman Mixdom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to respond to what you, Councilman Sanchez, had proposed before, I know that I can't remember right now if it's juvenile probation or DCF or them working together, but they actually do have a program for kids who are juvenile justice involved that puts them in something like a foster home, but in another place in the state, specifically to address what you were talking about, getting them away from the people they know and, the sets they may have run with. So that is a thing that is happening in juvenile court. And with respect, Attorney Walcott, I want to push back a little because I've been practicing in juvenile court for about 12 years. And I would suggest that, in fact, and I say this for anyone watching for the benefit of my colleagues, juvenile probation is, in fact, much more involved, much more invasive almost. And juvenile judges, I would say, less forgiving than adult court, in the sense that where oftentimes in adult court, someone who's on probation maybe comes up with one positive test for marijuana or something that's otherwise compliant, and their PO lets them slide. In juvenile court, that kid will sit in detention for a week pretty regularly. So in many ways, juvenile court is more harsh and more supportive. And I would just suggest that the big difference is the risk of punishment and a permanent record. But I also have a question. I don't want to just lecture. My question is, in your discussions about how to adapt, are you including juvenile public defenders in those conversations, the folks who represent these kids?
When I'm talking about the discussions I'm having right now, I have not. But I'm also going to push back on you just a little bit, because the easy cases are the kids that get into a fight at school, right? Or the kid who's smoking marijuana and not listening to mom and dad, or breaking curfew. The kids I'm talking about are 16, 17-year-olds who's up in Avon stealing a car with a firearm in it, that gets into a pursuit that then turns into a high speed, flying through the city like Grand Theft Auto, hits a pedestrian and now have serious physical injury. On those cases, what I'm saying is that the services that are being provided in juvenile court may not be robust enough, and by robust enough, I mean that kid may need longer than 1 week of intense monitoring, or when you said detention, they may have them in detention for a while. Detention is an extreme measure in juvenile court, and it should be. But I'm looking at the weekly check-ins. I'm looking at the probationary period for maybe 2 years, where that child can get services, and we can make sure that they're on the right track and things of that nature. So I know that, when we have the discussion, that's a wonderful idea to include in the juvenile public defenders. I will certainly look to fold them in, but I am talking about not the low risk kids. I'm talking about the medium to high risk kids.
Okay. And if you need a juvenile public defender, I know a guy.
Okay. All right. It's you. I want. Okay. Well, we're going to do that.
All right, and I just have one last question before we move on. I'm just curious as to the other piece of, okay, so obviously we have these juveniles that are stealing the vehicles, but time and time again, I've heard Chief Doty and Assistant Chief Medina, they were on the news. You have other officers on the news in meetings. Don't leave your fob keys. Don't leave anything that they can steal. You're giving them an opportunity to steal these vehicles right out of your driveway. And time again, this has been repeated. Is there anything in place where a fine can be levied onto the owner of the vehicle, especially if it's in some kind of violent crime or drug sale activity, or whichever one it may be? Is there anything in place to hold them accountable? And I'm not saying that, they don't have the right to leave their vehicles unlocked and running in the driveway, but, this contributes to the situation that we're at now.
There are a lot of public awareness campaigns that say, lock your vehicle, take your key fobs with you, don't leave anything valuable in your car, safe storage of your firearms, right? There's nothing in place right now to impose a fine. What I would say is that I've heard a lot of stories from people who have had their vehicles stolen about the extreme hardship that it imposed. One gentleman who delivered newspapers every morning starting at 2-3 o'clock, and that was his way to do that. And so without his vehicle, he lost his second source of income, which was significant to his household. And so we may not think about, we may not think about the harm that is caused by the person who caused to the person that had their vehicle taken, but there is there. It is there. and we don't have any plans to hold anyone accountable. But I also hadn't thought about it before. Yeah.
Well, I'm not looking to victimize the victim. I'm just saying, more awareness somehow. I mean, we're all responsible for what may start. It can start as a simple, someone stealing the car out the driveway, but then what are they going to use that vehicle for? What crime?
Right.
Or it could be a hit and run, and who's responsible at that point?
Right.
Okay, so is there any other questions before we move on? All right. Well, thank you, Ms. Walker. Really appreciate your attendance and joining us here for this committee meeting, and looking forward to working with you. I also want to recognize that we have our Majority Leader, Councilman Clark, online. He's the co-chair with me. Thank you, Councilman, for joining us. All right.
Thank you, Councilman Sanchez, and Ms. Walcott. Thank you for your presentation as well. And I do look forward to working with you in the foreseeable future.
Yes, you too, sir. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So now we're going to move on to Chief Freeman, Chief of Hartford Fire Department. Thank you for joining us today, this evening, Chief, and we're ready for your presentation.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Councilman, and good evening, sirs and madams of the council. I'm going to, and my esteemed colleague, Chief Doty, as well. Hope everyone's doing well. I'm going to try my best to share my screen for this presentation. And can everyone see it okay?
Yes.
All right, excellent. All right, so for first up, in regards to your Hartford Fire Department, COVID-19, our personal protective equipment, currently our inventory is very healthy. We actually, from the authorization of Ms. Montanez, our Chief Operating Officer, just put in another significant order to get us through the second phase and first quarter of 2021. So we have no concerns, no issues with our personal protective equipment, not just for the fire department, but for all city employees. We're doing great. Also, just recently delivered 140 boxes of nitrile gloves to Chief Doty's team. That's 7,000 pairs or 14,000 individual gloves to our police officers. Quarantine, right now we have 4 firefighters that are currently off duty because they're quarantining from being COVID-19 positive. We have another 3 that are positive, but they got it from non-fire department activity. And we have another 11 that's currently being evaluated by St. Francis. So we should find out within the next 72 hours if any of those 11 who were exposed to the 3 here at work from an administrative standpoint will test positive. It's highly unlikely for the simple fact here specifically where the exposure took place, the employees were wearing not only just their respiratory protection, but also gloves when they're not in their work area, as well as a face shield. So we are anticipating the majority, if not all of those 11, those test results to come back negative. Our insurance services office rating score, roughly 2 months ago, ISO, which all of you are well aware, your fire department was the first insurance services office ISO Class 1 department in all of New England, first earned that designation February 1st, 1991. Our last inspection occurred back in late 2015. We got the results January 2016. And in order to obtain a Class 1 or above, you have to score at least a 90. On that visit, we scored a 92. We anticipate on this visit, which we should get the final results within the next 2 weeks, that we approved upon even on that score of 92. The highest score you can get is 100, but we anticipate improving upon that score of 92 from this last inspection. As soon as we get those results, obviously, that information will be shared with you. Your fire department's still been very busy, active in the community, although we're doing things a lot different than we normally do. We are doing even virtual fire safety presentations. We are still doing car seat installations. I just saw Lieutenant Lopez out doing probably the third one this week, just today, out in our parking lot, wearing full gown, gloves, respiratory protection, as well as even a face shield. So your fire department is still serving the community as they always have, even with the COVID-19 personal protective equipment restrictions. And that lends itself into some of the partnerships that we have going on as of recently. Salvation Army, this past weekend, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., we collected hundreds of toys from our citizens, your Hartford firefighters, as well as your Hartford police officers here at 253 High Street, the Public Safety Complex. And we're actually able to give those toys to the Salvation Army at the conclusion of that gathering. And it was great to see Salvation Army being so grateful for the contributions of the fire department in collecting these toys for children in the city of Hartford, so they will have a good Christmas. Also, the Hartford Foundation, going back a few months ago, we assisted the Hartford Foundation in not just procuring personal protective equipment for the Greater Hartford Arts Council, but we also assisted them with disseminating that personal protective equipment. So just as early as this past Monday, the Hartford Foundation asked us to assist them again in disseminating or procuring and disseminating personal protective equipment for roughly 40 different programs for our youths that are going to be participating in various different groups and settings this summer. And their concern is, well, how are we going to get the PPE? So because of the great job that the men and women in the fire department did with procuring and help disseminating the personal protective equipment for the thousands of members of the Greater Hartford Arts Council, they've asked us to help them again, and we've obviously obliged. So we're looking forward to assisting with that. Also, this past Saturday, we assisted Director Arroyo with her flu clinic. We had roughly 66 citizens come through at the Xfinity parking lot and get their flu shot. It was a great exercise, and we now know that if we have to set up a drive-through vaccination process, that we'll be able to do it without a hitch. So kudos to Director Arroyo and her team. Also, Assistant Chief Rodney Barco, who also serves as Deputy Director of Emergency Management for the city, was on scene for the entire time. It was a great effort by all city employees and our volunteers who assisted with that process. Fire stat, we're going to go through here in just a second. We have the majority of our data sets that we lost previously. We have that back up and running. So I'll be able to go through some of those critical slides that you're used to seeing here in just a moment. And next up on the list is new apparatus update. So we have 4 new apparatus that are inbound. These 2 apparatus, the one on the left is the heavy rescue, or also known as the Tactical Unit 1. It is the busiest heavy rescue in the United States, running over 5,500 calls a year. It's actually here in the city. It's going through some last minute retrofitting by our very talented technicians in our equipment maintenance division. So it's not in the firehouse yet responding to calls, but at least it's home in the city. And the picture on the right is going to be our brand new Engine 2, which will serve off of Main Street. It just made it here to New England, not quite home yet, but we will be going up to Mass to do a final inspection since we could not go down to Florida to do the inspection at the plant in Ocala. So we're actually going to do the inspection here in Massachusetts. So picture on the left is your new heavy rescue. Picture on the right is your new Engine 2, which is going to be the second busiest engine company in the city. The busiest engine company in the city is Engine 1. We anticipate taking reception of all 4 of our new apparatus by the end of the year. Very excited about that. Any questions on any of those items before I move on to some statistics?
Yeah, I have a quick question, Chief. So prior to accepting the apparatuses, is there like a 100-point check that you have to go through, or 1,000-point before receiving and accepting?
Absolutely, sir. A very detailed inspection takes place before we take final reception of the apparatus. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. So here, ladies and gentlemen, is a chart showing your EMS responses for the city for all of our EMS responses. We ran on roughly 1,600 in the month of October, and we averaged 77.49% of the time getting on scene within 5 minutes or less. Our goal is 90%, and as you can see, historically, the highest that we have gotten for this particular year is just under 85%. However, although we have not met that 90 percentile, we consistently stay in the high 70s, low 80s, which is higher than neighboring fire departments or even compared to other like-sized fire departments across the country. Your fire department still responds faster to EMS calls than other organizations. So, but for last month, we averaged getting on scene in 5 minutes or less, 77.49% of the time. Structure fires, we had 12 structure fires in the month of October, and 100% of the time, the first arriving apparatus got there in 6 minutes or 20 seconds or less. Something that I found even more impressive than that number is if you look at the middle of the slide on the very bottom, the percentage of property saved. Your firefighters saved 99.14% of the property that they responded to. That is simply amazing. But hats off to their commitment, their dedication, their competency, and lastly, their professionalism for doing so extremely well in such a challenging month with 12 structure fires.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question? Councilman Sanchez,
Yeah.
may I ask a question? Chief.
Yes, you're probably going to ask the same one I'm asking. I think it's the ransomware.
That I assumed that's what that was. Chief, I'm wondering, the 99%, which, thank goodness, is that certainly it's our arrival time? Is it because, depending on what kind of structure, is it because a lot of people now have smoke detectors? Is there a reason? Is that, how do we score? I mean, score is not the word, but how do we get to that good percentage?
That's a great question, Madam Councilwoman. And the answer to that question is firefighters getting on scene as quickly as possible. Your firefighters do an amazing job by getting on scene, getting water on the fire. It's one thing to get on scene in a short period of time, but it's another to actually put water on a fire. Right. Not only do your firefighters get on scene very quickly, but they do an exceptional job by actually flowing water on the fire to stop property damage. And yes, Councilman Sanchez, that is because of the ransomware. We lost all the data for the month of August, but let's just assume that your firefighters remain consistent, and that was 100%. We're going to call that one 100% too.
I absolutely agree. Thank you.
Yes, sir. All right, so looking at some emergency response data, here's our total EMS calls for the month of October. As you can see, the total, as I mentioned earlier, is 1,604. And you can see the breakdown by neighborhood as to the quantity of calls and what type of calls happen in the neighborhood. So Northeast, which is always one of the higher neighborhoods on the list, was at 154. Asylum Hill was at 145. Frog Hollow, 171. Berry Square, 154. Next is Narcan Administered. For the month of October, we had a total of 21 calls pertaining to your firefighters administering Narcan. And again, this is just Hartford firefighters. That's not including Hartford police officers or AMR or Aetna ASM ambulance services. This is just Narcan that your firefighters administered, and that was a total of 21 for the month of October. So we had 5 in Frog Hollow, 4 in Northeast, 3 in Berry Square, 3 in West End, and 2 in the South End.
Chief, is this with the Narcan? Is this considered low compared to the beginning of the year, to the COVID?
It's consistent. It's consistent. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Bro. This next, sorry, Councilman Mick, I'm sorry, you had a question, sir?
Oh, yeah, if through the chairman, if it's all right. It was actually concerning the response times from earlier. I don't know, I think a few months back I had asked about the effect of speed bumps, especially on Flatbush Avenue, on response times. And at the time you said we had to wait and see, and you were going to take stock. So I wonder if we can check in on that and see how, if at all, those speed bumps have, what feedback are you getting from the folks in the field?
Okay. So to answer your question directly, Mr. Councilman, I don't have the quantitative data sets for you to review, for you and the rest of the council to review. I hope to have that by the end of the week, but certainly I will forward that as soon as I receive it. But what I can tell you from a qualitative standpoint, just from speaking with the tour commanders and the tour commanders speaking with the officers at Station 15 on New Britain Ave, which Flatbush is their response district, specifically Engine 15 and Ladder 2, the speed bumps are a hindrance. The firefighters aren't fond of them, and they try to avoid them at all costs, just because it does add some time on them getting to where they need to be if we are responding lights and sirens. And specifically, the speed bumps are at Westbrook and Saybrook, Westbrook and Chandler, Saybrook and Bannister, Bannister and Ledger. Now, when we first did our standards of response coverage analysis going back 12 months ago for our accreditation, we had 185 speed humps in the city. So that 185 doesn't even include these 4 speed humps off of Flatbush. So we can assume, and we're actually in conversations with Director Looney of Public Works to get an updated list of total speed humps in the city. But we presume that we're going to be either at 200 or just over 200 in the city. And my recommendation, Mr. Councilman, even before looking at the quantitative data, but just getting the feedback from our firefighters, is that we just continue, we being public safety, my office, Chief Thody, continues to have conversations with Director Looney of Public Works before we place additional speed humps in the city, because it does impact responses. I mean, every speed hump per previous study that I looked at from the Department of Transportation, you see either a 5 to at least 14-second lag on that one particular speed hump as you're trying to negotiate it. And our firefighters, they use the word 30. They use 30 seconds. They felt like it took them roughly 30 seconds from decelerating to negotiating the speed hump and then accelerating again, because that study from the 5 to 14 seconds, that was on a passenger vehicle, not for a large fire apparatus. And on top of that, we also have additional wear and tear on the struts and the suspensions of the fire apparatus with the speed hump. So that's the tentative information, Mr. Councilman, coming back. I will get specific addresses and responses. And if we had various responses to the same address going back previous years, I'll make sure I include that to where response in 2020 post the installation of a speed hump versus prior to, so we can get a good idea of how that impacted the fire department's response.
Great, thank you.
Yes, sir. I don't know, Chief Thody, do you have any feedback from police officers, since we're talking public safety, on the speed humps through you, Mr. Chair, if that's okay?
Absolutely.
Yeah, Chief, nothing that we've put into some kind of a study. I think that they are a hindrance to us, probably on the same scale as they're a hindrance to the motoring public, which is probably the goal. So we drive much smaller vehicles that are much easier to navigate, but they have stiff suspensions in them that are designed for police package vehicles, so they are bumpy. I think we are on the same page where my officers are looking to avoid them at all costs, just like your firefighters are. But the problem is probably a lot closer to the study for us, because we're driving, generally speaking, either cars or SUVs. So I think it's a little bit less impactful on us, but it still does have an impact.
All right.
Thank you, Chief.
All right, Mr. Chair, any questions on Narcan?
No. Thank you. Anyone else?
I have a question.
Okay.
Chief, for clarification purposes, this report on Narcan is only administered by an actual firefighter. So if you get called to a scene and there's a private individual that has given someone the Narcan, that is not on this report. It's only administered by the fire department, or you don't have any data from police or agencies that report to the city of Hartford as to how much Narcan is given or administered throughout the city of Hartford. Is that correct?
We can gather that information, and to your point, Madam President, we only track what we administer for cost tracking purposes. So right now for Narcan, it's roughly $51 per dose. So we track because I need to know what I need to go back to Ms. Montanez as far as an increase on projected costs for Narcan for the upcoming fiscal year. However, what we do is we share our Narcan administering information with the police department. So our strategic planning manager, Leo Siri, we have automated reports that ties in the police department. So what information we have as far as what you're looking at now, but it's done on a daily basis, that includes the police department, so they know exactly where the Narcan is being administered. We also would be able to tie Director Arroyo in, our Health and Human Services Director, to get a holistic view or idea of the number of Narcan doses being administered in the city. I hope that answers. So we don't house that in the fire department, but Director Arroyo would have that answer as far as total Narcan administered.
Okay, so this doesn't go through the emergency services department that you direct, so that you can tell Ms. Montanez what to project for following months on Narcan. So when the police department runs out of Narcan, do you supply them?
No, ma'am. Chief Doty, he buys his own Narcan.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and I just want to let everyone know, as an FYI, I can only see 6. So if you have a question, just sound off. Thank you.
Thank you.
This next slide is for all fires. We had a total of 51 different types of fires, 13 being vehicle fires, 12 structure fires, cooking fires were 4, trash or rubbish fire 4, brush fire 3, outside rubbish 3, natural vegetation 3, and it goes on from there. With the most activity being in the Northeast NRZ, and the second highest activity was behind the rocks with 6 incidents. And last but not least, this shows you from a structure fire standpoint, where the structure fires occurred as they relate to the locations of your 11 strategically located firehouses throughout the city. And also, Mr. Chair, Ms. Haley has this presentation. So if you or any other member of the council would like to have it, she does have it available.
Okay, I'll make sure we share it. Thank you.
Yes, sir. And that concludes my presentation, sir.
Okay, thank you so much, Chief. Is there any questions from the from council? Okay, Chief, thank you so much for the presentation. As always, it's a great presentation, and I look forward to seeing you soon. And I look forward to seeing your firefighters on Sunday supporting us at the event for the giveaway of the hot meals. Appreciate it.
Chief, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Now we have Chief Doty. Thank you, Chief, for the HPD. Where are you? Oh, there you go.
I'm here. Good evening, everybody. Just, first quickly, a couple thoughts from the previous presentations with the fire department and the Narcan. Fire department being first, kind of the first medical responders now, they use a lot more than we do. Our Narcan usage is very low. We also have EMS that tends to get there and administer the Narcan before we do. We do keep those stats. I can bring them with me for the next public safety meeting. But it's nowhere, it pales in comparison to fire and EMS, unless the officer is literally happens to be in close proximity. We don't administer nearly as much Narcan as fire and EMS does. To the juvenile issue, just something to think about for this committee. one of the reasons that we've harped on changing some of the ways that juveniles are dealt with in the criminal justice system, at least from the policing perspective, and I fully recognize that that's only one perspective, is that we see these kids that are stealing cars, driving recklessly, sometimes crashing into things, sometimes crashing into people, sometimes crashing into police cars, that we arrest. We give them a juvenile summons. They're released either on basically their own recognizance or to a guardian whenever we can. And we see them stealing cars again the next day, sometimes in the same day, sometimes in the same week. And this goes on 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. And we know of tragic stories of some of these kids, dying in these car accidents or killing other people in fatal accidents. And one of the primary drivers behind my ask, at least to the state's attorney and to the legislators, to do something different, is I believe that we need to some degree, save some of these kids from themselves. I would rather see them, maybe have to face the criminal justice system in a harsher way than end up dead or killing somebody else. So I don't have the answer. And I don't pretend to, but I think that when we have these kids that are getting arrested 3, 4, 5, 6 times, in a month period for the same offenses, and it's a dangerous offense, stealing a car and driving it, fast through the city. We've seen numerous examples of how that ends tragically. I think we do have to do something a little bit different. So that's just the police department's kind of side of that. And then just lastly, I know State's Attorney Walcott's off the phone now, but I just want to say, it's very refreshing to have a state's attorney that's so open and willing to work on things. She's on the court side, we're on the police side, so we don't always come to the same place. There's a lot of cases where I want prosecution, and she says, well, we just don't have it to go this far, but we talk, literally 5 times a week, sometimes more, about issues. And it's just good to have that relationship. We haven't had that relationship in the past. She's met with my detective bureaus. She's offered to bring prosecutors in to do training on how our officers can kind of improve their abilities to write warrants that are, not just geared towards making an arrest, but warrants that are geared towards making a prosecution. And I just think it's a great relationship. So I just wanted to publicly say that, even though she's not on the call anymore. With that, I'll attempt to share my screen here, hopefully as efficiently as Chief Freeman did.
And again, if anyone has a question, just speak out. My view of everyone is limited.
Can everybody see that slide there?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So just kind of quickly here, I'm going to go over the CompStat package that was sent out to all of the full CompStat package for all 4 districts and citywide was sent out to the committee members. These CompStat packages are still available on the website. So if anybody wants to get a little deeper into this or has any questions that are deeper, I'm going to focus on the violent crime uptick. I will hit this one slide quickly just to kind of show where we are as at the year, this year to date. As you can see, murder down, rape down, our robberies up slightly, aggravated assaults up pretty significantly, burglary down just slightly, larceny up just slightly, and auto theft driving some of the more significant increases in our Part 1 crime. So
Mr. Chair, through you, excuse me, Chiefs, I'm sorry. I should know this. What is categorized as aggravated assault?
It's an assault with a weapon. So when you look at the bottom, your shooting incidents are actually encapsulated in your aggravated assaults. We break out shooting incidents just so that we know what we're dealing with for shootings, but an aggravated assault is something above a simple assault that as defined by the FBI. So it's an assault with a weapon. It could be a knife, it could be a pipe, it could be anything like that. Okay. So overall, what we're looking at is an 8.8% increase year to date, which equates to 351 Part 1 crimes. So the Part 1 crimes are what you see there: murder, rape, robbery, aggravated assault, burglary, larceny, and auto theft. The auto thefts take up 134 of those 351 crimes that were up, and that's why it's 31.9% up. We have dedicated, we usually have 2 auto theft detectives. We've added 4 officers into that division. So we have actually 6 police officers working on auto theft, along with the statewide auto theft task force for the last 4 weeks. We have seen a 12, almost 13% increase in auto theft arrests.
I'm sorry, Cody. A quick question: Are these new officers that you have hired, or you have actually pulled them from other departments?
No, so the 4 officers that we've added to the auto theft division are officers that were selected from the patrol division. So they're not detectives. We've taken them from patrol and given them an opportunity to work in auto theft. If you recall, with the cultural analysis, one of the things that the police officers really liked was the ability to work in a detective division, for a 30 or a 60 or a 90-day rotation to kind of learn how the detective division works. So this is an expansion of that program to auto theft, where we're having a specific problem. So we took something that the officers seem to like and something that seems to work, and we've expanded it into other areas other than just major crimes or special investigations or crime scene or VIN. We've expanded it into auto theft as well. So those extra hands on deck are from the patrol division. There are police officers.
Okay.
So we had 134 up, and then again the aggravated assault. If you look at the number on the bottom, that's our shooting numbers and shooting incidents and shooting victims. We're up 55% there. That's certainly our most troubling area. If there is, these numbers this year are not where we want them to be. They're especially the shooting numbers, but the crime numbers in general, we don't want to see an increase, even if it's an 8.8% increase. If you look in the 2 and 3 year comparisons, we're still doing pretty well over the last 3 to 4 years. We're still showing decreases overall, but except for in the shooting category. But this is not where we want to be. This is a problem that a lot of departments are having, not just us. A lot of people pointing fingers at a lot of different things, COVID and other things. But the reality is that we're doing our best to keep a lid on it. And I'll go into kind of where we're at with the shootings next.
Okay. And I had another question. So I was informed that the state police was pulled out of Hartford. Is that a correct statement? Yesterday, and if so, why?
No, that's not correct. So the initial ask from the state police was for a 2 to 4 week commitment. We are at 4 weeks. So I had a conversation with Commissioner Ravelli yesterday, and we evaluated the need for the where the state police are and what they're doing, and we are going to constantly make adjustments. And the state police cannot be dedicated to Hartford indefinitely.
Okay.
So in the areas where we need them to continue to be here, I have Commissioner Ravelli's commitment that they will continue to be here. But we did scale back in certain areas where we weren't seeing as much of an impact as we had thought.
So I also like to share with you, Council President, that even with the state police being and assisting us, that HPD is actually doing all the work 100% of the time, and with this. I
am well aware of that, Councilman Sanchez.
Okay. So then I have a question. Excuse me. Okay, so I have a question for you, Chief. In the shooting incidents and victims, that's a 1-to-1, right? That doesn't mean that the shooting incidents is just at 200. That's only what we identified so far, right?
We have had 200 shooting incidents and shooting victims year to date.
And so my question is that this is for each shooting is a victim, but there is other shootings that's not here identified, correct?
No, for the purposes of reporting to the FBI, which is where our CompStat information comes from, every victim is counted as a shooting. If you have a shooting with 2 or 3 victims, those individual victims are counted. That's an individual assault.
Okay, Councilman Mickham.
Just to follow up on that, if there's a shooting with no victim, is that not counted? Like if there's just shots fired or something like that, that doesn't go on this list?
Correct.
Gotcha.
All right, so we're going to look just next. This next slide is our 4-week over 4-week look at kind of how we've impacted some of the areas that have been most violent and highest on the priority list. So this is basically the last 28-day period compared to its previous 28-day period, and we've really ramped up our efforts and along with our partners, the state police and others, over the last 4 weeks. So this is kind of a 4-week report card on how we did compared to the previous 28 days. So if you look at the top category, homicides by gun, we had 3 in the previous 28 days. We had 1 in the last 28 days. Assault 1 by gun, which just means basically someone shot with a victim, to Councilman Mickham's point. This means someone struck. So the previous 28 days there was 24. The last 28 days there was 18, down 25%. This is the kind of to Councilman Mickham's point. This is shots fired where someone shoots a gun but doesn't hit anyone, doesn't hit a person. Could hit a car, could hit a tree, could hit a sign, doesn't hit a person. The previous 28 days we had 83. The last 28 days we had 55, so down a third, 33%. Now those are confirmed. So what that means is that we found a casing, or we found damage, or we found something that could confirm that a shot was in fact fired. Shots fired unconfirmed means that we got a report of shots fired, but we weren't able to confirm that it actually happened. That doesn't mean that it didn't happen. It just means that we couldn't find any evidence and couldn't confirm it. 136 to 104, down 23.5%. So totals in those categories, we're down 27.6% this last 28 days compared to the previous 28 days. Normally, I think I would be able to say that some of that could be attributable to weather, but we had a 4-day stretch in the 70s, and we were still effective in that 4-day weekend, basically a Friday through Monday in the 70s. We were still effective in keeping these numbers down. So I think that it's attributable to the efforts of our cops out there. So that being said, we look at our recovered firearm and firearm arrests. The previous 28 days we had 17 guns. In the last 28 days we had 28 guns, up 64%, and firearm arrests up from 12 to 21, up almost 75%. Another significant piece of that in the last 4 weeks is that we've been working directly with State's Attorney's Office, State's Attorney Walcott, and also the U.S. Attorney's Office to make sure that those gun cases are taken seriously. And the State's Attorney's Office has been helpful in a couple cases for us to keep bonds high, keep bonds from being reduced. We hear a lot about, during COVID, bonds being released and people being bonded out. Some of these more severe gun cases, we've worked with the court to try to keep the bonds high enough so that we can keep individuals off the streets until we can quiet some of these things down. This was one day. I sent this out in an email to a couple folks, and I know it went out to the media, but this was one 12-hour stretch on October 23rd where we made, we seized 6 illegal firearms, made 7 arrests, and that was in 5 different incidents. The key thing here is, the first arrest was made by our vice, our violent crimes unit in our vice intelligence and narcotics division. 2 arrests made there, but then you see there was 2 arrests made by patrol officers, 1 arrest made by Northwest District officers, 1 arrest made by Southeast District officers, and another arrest made by patrol officers. So this is a concerted effort to work throughout the city. A lot of times, we have to answer the questions, why are we focusing our efforts north, or why are we focusing our efforts south? These arrests were made throughout the entire city. So we're focused on our hot spots and our hot people to try to make sure that we're quelling the shootings and the gun violence. And then a couple specific cases. This one was from 268 Sargent Street. This picture has gone around a little bit. That is an Uzi type assault handgun, for lack of a better term, with a silencer on it. An exceptionally dangerous gun with an extended magazine. This was a great arrest by our violent crime unit. This is an interesting case, and we'll touch on this a little bit more later as to where these guns are coming from. This was on Monday the 9th. They arrested 2 individuals that were trying to sell these 5 handguns that were out of North Carolina. The individuals were out of North Carolina, and so were the firearms. So we are seeing some, these guns coming from other places and out of state. I'll go over that a little bit more in a minute. But a lot of them are coming from the south, which is kind of a shift. We were seeing them for years coming from the north, from Vermont, New Hampshire, places like that. This is a bit of a shift coming from the south. This was an assault rifle that our Vice Intelligence and Narcotics and our state police partners, along with the statewide narcotics task force, got off the street on Thursday, November 12th. They were called for an individual displaying this out the window of a car. They were able to use the camera systems and some intelligence to find out where the individuals were headed, and ultimately seized this assault rifle with a 30-round magazine, extremely dangerous gun, off the streets.
Chief, Chief, are you seeing more guns with silencers than before? Or
no? I don't. We don't see guns with silencers very often. That one is the name on the silencer. I don't know a lot about that manufacturer, but the name on the silencer and the name on the gun is the same manufacturer. So it appears as though that gun kind of came that way. But I do not see a lot of guns with silencers, no.
Okay. And when one is caught with one, is it against the law to carry a silencer?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, there is you can get a federal tax stamp that can make a silencer legal. It's very difficult and very expensive to do it, but that was not the case in this particular situation.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. So this is just kind of a visual representation of the 34 firearms that we have recovered from October 10th to November 14th. Significant work by, again, all aspects of the department, from patrol to our community service officers to our detectives and beyond. And then this is kind of an interesting breakdown of what we know about those guns so far. We have a system where we try to track where these guns came from. So 8 guns of those 34, 8 were confirmed to be stolen. 2 guns had obliterated serial numbers, so they were very difficult to trace. We send them to the lab and they try to raise the serial number so we can figure out where they came from, but we don't have anything back on them yet. 1 gun is considered a ghost gun, so it's basically a homemade firearm. Those are also, I'm going to oversimplify it by just saying that those are extra illegal. There is an additional charge for possessing a ghost gun. 7 of these guns were recovered in North Carolina, or were originated in North Carolina. 3 in Georgia, 3 in Connecticut, and 1 each from Alabama, Virginia, South Carolina, and Massachusetts. And again, some of the additional ones we're still waiting for traces to come back on them. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms assists us with the tracing, and sometimes they come back quickly if the guns are easy to trace, and sometimes they don't. But I think this is an interesting trend that we're gonna be looking at, having some conversations with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, and seeing about how these guns are traveling from state to state, and why they're ending up here. I unfortunately don't have a good answer to that question right now, other than it is a shift in what we've seen in the past. But some of these guns are coming from pretty far away. Some of the staffing constraints that we've had, we've been putting a significant number of police officers out there on the streets to do this. You know, it's always concerning what the impact of that is on the police officer, but just so that everyone here is aware, during this previous 4-week period, we had to hold over 38 officers, which means that they came to work for an 8-hour shift with all intentions of going home after 8 hours, and we had to hold them here for at some period of time over 8 hours to fulfill the needs of the department and to keep the folks in the city safe. And then 141 order-ins means that the officer was either regularly scheduled for a day off and had to be ordered in because we needed extra bodies. We've been putting pretty close to 100 police officers out on the streets on the weekends to try to quell the violence. Just as a comparison, the same period of time, the same 4-week period of time last year in 2019, we had 9 holdovers and 0 order-ins. So that's just kind of a display of the magnitude of the presence of police out there and what we're doing to try to curb some of this violent crime. We've also seen an increase in overtime expenditures the last 4 weeks. To the tune of $790,000 over what would have been $403,000 last year. It's about a 96% increase. Again, this is this is a difficult time, and we are responding as seriously as we can. So just a little look at what that does to us as far as staffing and how difficult it is to staff it to that level to try to keep the shootings to a minimum.
Mr. Chair, through you. Yeah, Chief, can you go back? Okay. I don't know if the microphone sounds bad. Is there a way to have data that, in other words, you gave us a 4-week period. Mm-hmm. Is there a way, first of all, a further week period, but is there a way to, in a graph or a chart, show holdovers and order-ins and also show the crime at the same time? Because I'd be interested to see if it's always a correlation. Because if this 4-week period, clearly a year ago, there were 0 order-ins, I find, I just would love to see, first of all, a greater period of time and it in correlation with the actual demand for the order-ins.
Yeah,
does that make sense to you?
It does. We can do that. The reason I use the 4-week period is because that's when we really started the kind of full court press, for lack of a better term, operation with state police and DEA and FBI and parole and probation and everybody else. So you will see, a correlation. You will not see, if you look at a 4-week period last year, you're likely not going to see a crime increase. What you're seeing is our response to some sort of an increase in crime. And you'll see that this year, probably, what would be interesting to look at is the whole year. That would be data intensive, but it would be something to look at. You're going to see increases during COVID. You're going to see increases for the firework issue. You're going to see increases for, Weathersfield Avenue and the street racers. You're going to see increases when we were seeing the pop-up parties. You're going to see increases for protests. You're going to see order-ins for that. So I think that you might not necessarily just see a correlation to crime, but it would be interesting to take a graph and kind of show what happened and to cause our response to be that we needed to increase staffing. And I'm sure that they would correspond in this 4 weeks to crime. But like I said, in previous periods throughout 2020, as happy as we all are that 2020 is coming to a close, I think you're going to see correlations between all of those different things, whether it's quality of life issues like fireworks, whether it's, like I said, the street racers and all the other unusual things that we had to deal with this year.
Right. That would be great if you could send us a graph on the entire 2020, just so that we could see. Thank you.
Sure. All right, so the next area, much like Chief Freeman did, is going to go into our kind of where we are with COVID-19, where we are with our operations, and how we're keeping our officers and the public safe. In the beginning of this, we put together a series of special orders to help address how we alter our operations to address COVID-19 and to keep our cops safe, to keep the community safe, and to be able to fulfill our obligations as a police department. We're not able to, completely close down and not do the work, much like the fire department, the EMS, the hospitals, and many other essential workers throughout the country. So we have 9 general orders, special orders, that are out right now. These are basically the titles of them. I'll go through the individual pieces of them, and these are also available in our forward-facing documents before Councilman Mitchum asks for them. They are on the website, and they are in our forward-facing documents. So if you want to see the whole policy, you can see them on there, but I'll go through kind of a summation of them. 01 is our continuity of operations plan, which is kind of a doomsday plan. That is not out there publicly. It talks a lot about, how we handle certain things, and that gets into police operations that we don't really want that to be out there in case someone wants to take advantage of a situation. That document is an internal document, and it only went to lieutenants and above within the police department to begin with. It is a sensitive document, to say the least, but it just, we always talk about operations plans. This is our kind of doomsday operation plan for COVID. If we were to lose a significant percentage of the police department to COVID, or really anything else. But this was the first time we had to put together a plan like that, where we could see, initial estimates were 30 or 40% of the department could go down, not just our department, but police departments across the country. So we had to figure out how we would continue to operate in a way that was safe for the public, knowing that we couldn't pick up the phone and call the state police or call, surrounding departments, because they would likely be dealing with the same thing. So that's 01. But 02 talks about what we did to adjust our arrests during the pandemic. The highlights of that policy are basically increased usage of summons arrests and promises to appear versus in custody. Bringing individuals into detention, into jail, into our building is not what we want to do during COVID. It exposes the arrestees to potential spread of the virus, and it exposes our police officers to potential to potentially be exposed to the virus. So we used our promise to appear powers as much as we could. Obviously, some categories we weren't able to do that, even in a misdemeanor sense: domestic violence, driving under the influence, and any arrest that was pursuant to a warrant with a judge set bond. We had to bring people into custody, but all other misdemeanors we kept to as much as possible to a summons arrest or a promise to appear. And then obviously felony arrests had to be handled according to the same procedures as we usually do. 2020-03, handling calls for service during the pandemic. This was really how we adjusted our operations to expose the public to the police as little as possible and expose the police to the public as little as possible, while still carrying out our duties to take written complaints and to take reports. So this really, we increased our staffing in teleserve. We made our all of our roll calls where cops are basically sent out to duty. They're given their marching orders, if you will. They're giving all their information prior to their shift. We shifted all those to be outdoors, and we used the roll call room. We added computers to the roll call room because the room was big enough so that we could have social distance occur within the room. And we had additional officers that could take complaints over the phone. non-emergency larceny complaints, motor vehicle accidents that didn't have injuries and where the cars were operable, lost or found property complaints, auto theft complaints where there was no solvability factors, no threat of violence like a carjacking or anything like that, and property complaints are all taken through the phone. We stopped responding, to some non-criminal community service calls, and we dealt with them over the phone, or we had CSOs follow up with them, community service officers follow up with people over the phone, civil matters, and then we also had our dispatchers request that complainants would meet the officers outside wherever possible, so that we were not indoors to be further exposed to the virus. And again, these are called special orders because they're only in place during the pandemic. Many of these came out in March, and they will be in place until someone, decides to say that the pandemic is over. I see a hand.
Thank you. For you, Mr. Chair. When you say non-criminal community service and civil matters, is that like wellness checks, things of that nature?
No.
What does that mean?
Wellness checks we would still do, but we get. I'm struggling to think of an example right now, but we get a lot of calls that aren't necessarily, normally things that we would go and do. It could be, I'm drawing a blank on a good example of one, but basically, if somebody wants to speak to a police officer, that's what a lot of times it'll be called, and civil matters are exactly that. When you have, eviction issues or landlord-tenant disputes or things like that. But like I said, any kind of well-being checks we would go to, we would call it a 27, or where we have to go facilitate like an exchange of kids between people that are that have protective restraining orders, things like that. Those we would still go to, but someone that would call the police and just, I want to speak to an officer about, XYZ. We would instead take a message, refer it to a community service officer to call back. I apologize for not, I'm having a little bit of I'm trying to think of a good example here. COVID-19 health screenings is 04. We got through the fire chief Freeman. We got the temporal thermometers, and we require that the officers take their temperatures before roll calls, so we can identify fevers as early as possible. Officers found to be symptomatic or showing a low-grade fever are referred for additional screening. So that's essentially, that policy went out as soon as we were able to get our hands on some thermometers. Remember, those were tough to get for a while. Exposure, illness, and return to work policy, that 05, just basically guidelines, puts the guidelines out there for how we deal with people that could potentially be COVID positive or people that have been exposed. We have a partnership with Trinity Occupational Health. And basically, once we have any indication that someone was exposed or may have symptoms, we put them off from work. And we refer them to Trinity Health. They have to fill out a questionnaire, and they have to actually talk to someone from Trinity Health. This is predominantly, like many other things, by Zoom. But the Trinity Health will make an assessment as to whether that individual can come back to work, and if so, when. So that basically takes the decision-making process about when someone comes back from having COVID, or when someone thinks they may have had COVID, out of the hands of us, who are not medical professionals, and puts it with our partner at Trinity Occupational Health. They're then permitted to return to work in accordance with CDC guidelines, which is not the full story. As many people know, some of the Hartford guidelines are more strict than the CDC guidelines. The CDC guidelines, can be a little bit of a moving target sometimes, but between Trinity Occupational Health, they have the Hartford policies, and they know the CDC guidelines, and they're the ones that ultimately make a decision as to when somebody comes back to work, not us. We had a class come out, and we had to figure out a way to do field training. That is a requirement through post. Luckily, this kind of came out pretty far into the pandemic, and we were kind of already seeing some decreases when this happened. But this is how we're dealing with cops in vehicles during the pandemic. The FTOs and the PPOs, they're screened in accordance with Order 004, which is the temperature. They take, both have to take their temperature before they get in they go out in the car together. They have to utilize protective the PPE anytime they can't socially distance. They also have each of the cruisers is assigned a cleaning bottle and a roll of paper towels so that they can clean out and disinfect the cars, and they have to do that at the beginning and the conclusion of every shift. And then they have to delineate functions. In other words, we don't want two different officers in the same car talking into the radio. So they decide who's going to talk on the radio for that shift, and that one person is the person that touches the radio for that shift. Same thing with the MDT, which is the laptop in the car, radio, the AM/FM radio, everything. We tried to basically isolate the two folks in the car as much as we could. So that is our FTO special order. Use of PPE is once we were able to actually get enough PPE out to the officers. This special order 008 is the one that talks about the use of PPE. It talks about the different types of PPE, when it should and shouldn't be used, outlines the different levels, low to moderate risk, and then high risk, and when basically to don your PPE and why. We have an infectious control officer, Officer Franco, medically trained. He maintains the inventory of the surgical masks and makes sure that we have available resources for the officers. And then we have personal isolation kits in the cruisers as well. But that policy dictates the use of PPE. And then 09 is the last one that came out, probably about 3 or 4, well, maybe a little longer than that, maybe about a month and a half ago. This where we started talking about travel, essential employee travel versus voluntary travel, and off-duty travel, and basically if you were going to a place that was considered a red zone or a troublesome state, what officers had to do before coming back to work. So all 9 of those are available. 8 of the 9 of them are available on the website. Some additional mitigation measures that we had is the decontamination of police vehicles by DPW. Mike Looney has been great about offering. We had a scenario where they offered basically drive-up decontamination of the cars between noon and 1:30 in the afternoon, and then again at midnight till 1 o'clock in the morning. That was offered from the very beginning of the pandemic. I believe it was initiated on March 19th, and it went all the way through sometime in April. We started to get indications from Department of Public Works that officers weren't using the service, and they were hiring overtime to provide people there to dedicated people there to clean the cruisers. So they were able to show us that officers just weren't coming. What they were doing was using the cleaner and the paper towels that were in the cruisers, and predominantly they were cleaning the cruisers themselves, it seemed like. So we put out a bunch of notices, a bunch of emails. Look, if officers are interested in this continuing, you have to use the service. Otherwise, these guys are just kind of being wasted, sitting there waiting for cars to come that never did. So it was a lack of interest, and we discontinued that sometime in the end of April. But we have now with the increase, again, we have reinitiated the cleaning of the vehicles by DPW. This time with the spike being as heavy as it is, the order on that, the special order on that will be coming out this week. That will mandate those cleanings. It won't be at the officer's discretion. Prior to this, it was at the officer's discretion. We have a gym in the building. We've limited the number of officers in the gym to no more than 5 at a time based on the size of the gym. We will return to outdoor roll calls. We do not violate the governor's orders of 25 people or more indoors. Our roll calls are generally about 10 or so. But I think it's important to be as careful as possible. So we'll be moving our roll calls back outside again this week. Detention division decontaminations have been done monthly, but they will be increased now with the spike in COVID-19 cases. GBD is Give Back Day training, so we modified our training to Parker Center Gym so people can be socially distanced, and we rolled back any of the Give Back Day trainings that's greater than 25 people once we went back to phase 2.1. So our trainings are in compliance with the governor's mandate. This week, we're figuring out a way to still continue to do our intelligence briefings and our ComStat meetings in a virtual way. That's tough with the number of people that are on the calls, but our ComStat meeting is Thursday, and we will hopefully have that figured out by then. Continuing our mitigation measures, we have a process in place that's been in place from the city since May 1st on how to decontaminate areas. So on May 1st, all supervisors of the police department were provided with a form where we can request emergency cleaning of areas of the building where if an individual, let's say in the Chiefs complex, tested positive, we would do a request form and DPW would come out and clean and disinfect the Chiefs complex. There's a special form for that for the city, which is the next slide. You'll see it in a second. All supervisors from sergeant all the way up to deputy chief were given those forms and the direction to use them on May 1st. And that is also the same form that we use to ask for the replenishment of PPE supplies through the Department of Public Works. It gets submitted up through the chain of command directly to me. As Chief Freeman mentioned yesterday, I was notified that, we were short on we had plenty of small and plenty of large, basically rubber gloves, but that we were running low on mediums and extra larges. So that form was completed, and Chief Freeman the next morning delivered 7,000 medium and 7,000 extra large gloves to us. So the coordination is great. Can't say enough about Chief Freeman keeping the PPE going. A lot of these slides and questions are answers to questions are a result of some of the questions that some council folks have asked me in the last week or so. I think it's important to keep the misinformation to a minimum here. If folks do have questions about our COVID protocols, like I said, they're posted on the website, and you can certainly email me. Like Chief Freeman, we are fortunately at a pretty low number. We have 9 total people in the entire police department that are out. 6 are confirmed COVID positive and waiting to return to work, and 3 are pending results. So that is about 1.2% of the department that is out of work right now due to COVID. And this
Don't mean to cut you off, but we have I guess on the previous subject, we have a question from Councilman Mictum.
Sure. Oh, no, actually, right as I was about to ask the question, he said the numbers, so no question for now.
Thank you, Chief.
Well, that's it. So this is the form, and that I think that is the last slide I've got. So I will open it up to questions. So timing was perfect.
Well, I must say you answered most of the questions I had in mind. So thank you for the detailed information, Council President Rosado.
Yes, Chief. No, mine was just a comment. Chief, thank you for this report. It practically answered all my questions, and thank you for clarifying those rumors about COVID within the police department. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Councilman, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Thank you for your presentation. Question regarding the special order for masks. If an officer is found in violation of the special order for mask or any other special orders, what's the disciplinary action?
So it would be failure to follow a policy or procedure, and they can be written up for it'd be just like violating any other policy. I think the first code of conduct stop on that is oral reprimand, I believe.
Thank you.
Councilman Mictum.
Thank you. To follow up on Councilman Clark's question, how many of those disciplines have issued? I know when I last asked this a couple months ago, there was none yet.
I don't know exactly how many. I don't think there's been a lot in the PPE department. Actually, there's at least one that I know of where an individual was in the PD not wearing a mask. I think a lot of our, much like we're trying to, the wearing PPE is difficult to enforce in the community, and it's difficult to enforce in the workplace. I've talked to, Chief Freeman, I've talked to colleagues, chiefs in other departments. It is difficult to get people to remember. It is getting better because I think it's becoming a part of life. But I've tried to take a more of a coaching approach unless it turns into a really egregious situation where someone's really exposing fellow employees or the public to danger. But we try not to take the immediate discipline approach with the PPE, just like we try to not take the police enforcement approach to PPE in the community too. But I don't have an exact number of people that have been counseled or written up or disciplined for PPE wearing issues.
Just a related question. I assume you've seen Kevin Brookman's blog post on this issue from last week, which you addressed a lot of in your initial presentation, but the allegations there are that our police sources are saying that that folks are not finding out when other officers or people in the department who work near them have been testing positive, that officers had to provide their own cleaning supplies, and that officers were told DPW didn't want to do the cleaning work when in fact that wasn't so. I assume you've seen the blog post, and I wonder if you could just respond to it a little bit, especially around what is the protocol for notifying one officer, sort of the contact tracing, if you will. Contact tracing, I'm sorry. In other words, so that when somebody gets sick, how do you make sure that everyone around them knows and gets tested and so on and so forth?
So I have not seen the post, and I'll only say that, I have to read a lot of things in this job, and I try to focus on things that I know I need to read and that I know are true. The problem with some of the stuff that comes out in unofficial ways is that it tends to mislead, and it a lot of times is just downright not accurate. We have had a healthy supply of PPE and cleaning products through DPW and through the fire department for the majority of this pandemic. In the beginning, it was very difficult to get PPE, and we had to, even the fire department had to give, people were reusing masks and that was just the reality. That's not the reality now. This form is a key piece of that. This form is designed to be filled out by anyone that needs anything. So it's discouraging to hear, and I don't know, I don't know the source, but it's discouraging to hear people say, well, I need so-and-so. I was talking to I was actually talking to Councilman Sanchez about this earlier, and I said, if one of my officers at the front desk, ran out of ink and a pen, I would anticipate that they would either go to the supply closet and get a new pen or ask, a supervisor for another pen, not go out and try to get it in another way. We have not denied any requests for cleaning. We have not denied any requests for equipment. It is our goal as a department to stay healthy and to make sure that we keep the community healthy. So I don't know the specifics of the post, other than to say, if contact tracing is done for everybody that tests positive, if we have, in the list that of the people that are out now, there was a couple people that were exposed in a classroom environment. Those questions are asked. We have, people in the department, we have our own personnel department that goes out and asks these questions. We also have the city that does contact tracing and asks these questions. It is difficult sometimes when someone gets exposed, to go back and figure out everybody that they were in contact with. That's a fact, not just in the police department, but that's a fact everywhere. I say, we continue to do the best that we can in extremely difficult conditions to keep everyone healthy. That is our goal. Obviously, as a police administration, is to, our responsibility is to keep everybody safe. That being said, I did hear, I heard a story, late last week that, somebody tested positive and that area wasn't cleaned, and my response is kind of this form. I don't pretend to be able to know that from the chief's office, that an area that was exposed wasn't cleaned. There are people supervisors, sergeants, lieutenants, captains that are responsible for making sure that these forms get completed. What I will say is that every time we've done this form, the Department of Public Works has come out and cleaned that day. Their response, Director Looney and his team, is incredible. They come in these crazy suits, and they do an incredible job. And you can see through the orders that we've put out, it is our goal to keep everyone safe. That's not to say that sometimes you don't get, some disgruntled folks that'll go out and speak out of turn, for lack of a better way of putting it. And unfortunately, that stirs up rumors, and then it seems like it catches on with some folks that seem to be the same people that that take those rumors as gospel, and they create a difficult environment to deal with. That's in addition to the reality of the difficult environment that we're already dealing with. So, I'm happy to clarify for anyone what we're doing, how we're doing it. Also, if there is a sunny side of rumors, is that every once in a while, if a rumor encompasses 10 things, one might be true where it's an area where we need to improve on. So, while I'm not a big fan of the way some of that information comes to light and the fact that it's not accurate, sometimes it does, bring to our attention something that needs to be rectified. So, and that side of it, I certainly welcome the questions, because when I ask the questions, if the answers aren't right from my staff, then I'll make sure it gets fixed. That's how we work for everything that we deal with in the police department. But like I said, specifics, that's kind of where we're at.
So is there any other questions from the council? No one? Okay, Chief, okay.
We're all back.
Okay.
Sorry.
Great.
I didn't realize I was sharing the PowerPoint that entire time. Sorry.
That's all right, Chief. I appreciate all the detailed information that you shared with us this evening and your presentation. It was awesome, and thank you for answering some of the questions and of course several of my questions earlier today, and sharing that information with our audience. With that said, I wish everyone a great evening. Please come out on Sunday from the St. Peter's Church on Main Street in Hartford between 11 and 2. We will be giving out hot meals to families. We're hoping to serve at least 2,000 residents in the city. Those that come in, we will be having COVID-19 testing there. And I also invited Liani to see if she wants to set up for offering some flu shots there. So, everyone, if I don't see you, have a great evening and a great weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, all.